Welcome into the PFF NFL Podcast. Steve Palazzolo here with Sam Monson. It is a special bonus episode, Sam. We're going to talk a little bit about our trip to Indianapolis. We saw a little joint practice with the Browns and the Colts. But we're going to start off with our friend, Ross Tucker, the godfather of many podcasts, and discuss
many
a little Philadelphia Eagles. He's the sideline guy for the Eagles. We got some insight there and some general O-line talk with him. Does that sound good?
Yep, let's do it.
Do you want to get right to it?
Yeah, fire it straight in.
We're going to bring in Ross, and we'll come back, and we'll tell you about our little excursion over at #Colts Camp. All right, we are happy to have Ross Tucker. That's at Ross Tucker NFL.
NFL, yeah.
On Twitter. And Ross, you're like the godfather of NFL podcasts, right? I mean, you've got a million podcasts out there. We love them. And I think all of our listeners should check them out. So at Ross Tucker NFL, the podcast guy, right? You got a million of them.
Well, so two things. First of all, thank you guys for having me. As you guys know, I'm a huge fan. The service that you guys provide, really services that you guys provide, both college and NFL, are invaluable. And I know a lot of times, you hear when people, give you the negativity. Well, here I am as a former player saying thank you because your data, your rankings are really, really helpful for me, whether I'm doing a college game or an NFL game. And as for the podcast thing, I think I probably told you guys this before, but I just lucked out. I retired in 2008. I was writing for Sports Illustrated. ESPN hired me away to write for them. And they asked if I would host their podcast. This is 2009, dudes. Yeah. And I was like, sure, I'd love to host your podcast. Literally didn't even know what a podcast was. Did it for 3 years. They had a lot of people listening. And then I went out on my own. So I've been doing my own podcast since 2012. So Ross Tucker Football Podcast is daily if you want a former player's perspective in like 30 minutes on what's going on around the league. And I got guys like Greg Cosell and Andrew Brandt join me. And then the next year I started a fantasy one with Evan Silva called Fantasy Feast. The year after that, I started a gambling one with Steve Fezzik called the Even Money Podcast. So it's just kind of grown from there. But honestly, I'd love to take more credit for it, but it's really dumb luck in ESPN calling me to write for them and asking me to host something. I never had an iPhone in my life. Like I literally did not know what a podcast was. So thank you, ESPN, for number one, hiring me, and then number two, letting me go.
Hey, that works.
How do you not have at Ross Tucker as a Twitter handle? Somebody beat you to it.
No, I'll tell you exactly what happened there, Sam. That's a great question. There's an imposter out there, unfortunately.
No.
No, you know what? There's actually a couple of other Ross Tuckers who have blue check marks.
Yeah, one of them is like a sports science guy, right?
Yeah, so there's two funny things about that, right? So number one, when I first got on Twitter, it was when I was asked to get on Twitter by Sports Illustrated in 2008 when I was writing for them, and they set up everything for me, and wisely, they made my Twitter handle at @SI_Ross Tucker.
Yeah.
Well, then what happens is 2 years later, as I told you, ESPN hires me, so I can't be at @SI_Ross Tucker. Well, in that time, some other guy named Ross Tucker, obviously, took at Ross Tucker. He's executive editor for Kantar U.S. Insights.
Of course.
Former Yahoo Finance breaking news editor, which sounds thrilling.
He's not nearly as famous as you. I'm sorry.
No, dude, you know what's weird about that, though?
But
I followed him at one point, and I DM'd him and said, hey, can we talk? And he said, sure. I said, I'm interested in maybe acquiring the Twitter handle. I wanted the extra 3, characters or whatever. And he never got back to me, which is weird because, when I was a player, guys,
right,
I used to dream that the team I was on would sign some big name free agent who would really want my number.
Yes.
And I'd be like, oh no, I really want it. Zach Martin, I really don't want to. Oh, okay, $25,000.
Yeah.
Okay, yep, here you go. And you're right, Sam. There is a sports science guy in South Africa, which is amazing because I say once every couple months, I get an email to rosstucker.com
right.
with a speaking engagement offer somewhere in South Africa. And I always say, I think you got the wrong guy. I need you to start accepting him.
Sure, I'm in.
Be like, yes. How much is a flight from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania to Cape Town?
Bring all your sponsors down there, that'd be great.
So, yes, that is the answer. But, yes, thank you guys so much for everything you guys do. I honestly could ask you guys a million questions. So I got 2 Eagles preseason games under my belt. It's my first time as the Eagles television analyst. And they had a few guys not get drafted that surprised me just based on what I knew of them. Sua Opeta, Ryan Bates. But the big one for me, guys, is TJ Edwards, the linebacker from Wisconsin. So living in Big Ten country, I watch a lot of Big Ten football. For 4 years, I swear every Wisconsin game I watched, the dude had 12 tackles, like 2 for loss, a sack, a pick. Like I could not believe that. And even last night, on Thursday night against the Jags, he made several plays. I know the knock on him is that he doesn't run great. I would just say this. I know you guys probably haven't evaluated. I don't know how quickly you turn around the preseason games, but he had a couple plays last night where his 5 and 10 yard bursts were really nice. And I went nuts on the telecast emphasizing that the game is about details, keying and diagnosing, and 5 and 10 yard bursts. The 40-yard dash at almost every position is something I care so little about. TJ Edwards flashed a real nice 5 and 10 yard burst last night. So I'm just curious where he ranked for you guys. Were you as surprised that he didn't get drafted? And was it a production thing, or was it strictly a health issue, or, his physical testing numbers?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it was physical testing. Yeah. Sam, you and I watched him, and we were like, all right. I remember you came in while I was watching him, and you said, we got to figure out, why aren't we higher on him? Because our grades were really good on him for multiple years. He started out in a part-time role, was really good. He always graded well, and there were a few plays where you said, oh, that's it, right? Sam, you said, okay, there is the lack of speed. So I think from an NFL standpoint, you could kind of see the lack of speed. We had him as more of a mid-late type of player, just on that production alone. But I think, you're right, Ross. It's a short area game at most positions, and then, instincts and football feel, or whatever you want to call it, football intelligence, whatever you want to call playing the game well, is just as important as, running in a straight line fast, for sure. Do you have anything else, Sam, on that from Edwards?
No, I agree. I think the thing that was strange is that he was always grading really well in coverage, and most of the time when you see these guys, they're really productive college linebackers, and they have some athleticism question marks. Coverage is where it shows up, right? They're really good run defenders. They make a ton of tackles, but they're not great in space, and they're not great in coverage. Edwards was always really good in coverage, and yet, so that's not where his relative lack of athleticism would show up. And then every now and again, it wasn't even a consistent thing. Just every now and again, you'd see a play where it's like, ooh, yeah, okay, it just got exposed there. But there may be a real chance that he's good enough down to down that every now and again he's going to get beat ugly, but overall he'd be a really productive player. And so far, his preseason grade has been pretty good as well.
Yeah, and so let me just piggyback on a couple things. One is, I know from talking with different coaches on different teams that, the days of 3 linebackers getting a lot of playing time are just kind of over. Yeah. It's really 2 linebackers, and I wouldn't be surprised we see more and more teams where it's 1 linebacker, and I'll even use the Eagles as an example, and then Malcolm Jenkins and Jonathan Cyprien, or, safeties who, are very good when they're in the box in the run game. Andrew Sendejo is another one. It seems like the Eagles have several of them. So I think in general, linebackers are devalued, although you have guys like Devin White and Devin Bush go really high. But then also I've had some people tell me that, their profile of guys that they want as backup linebackers, those guys all typically can really, really run, because they do get worried about 40 time for special teams purposes. Yeah. So, you can't really have a backup linebacker that isn't a core special teamer. So if the guy doesn't run that great and he's not going to be a core special teamer for you, it really hurts the value there. I don't know. Sometimes I think, even if a guy doesn't have a great 40 time, some of these guys I've seen, I can remember Matt Chatham when I was with the Patriots. He wasn't a great 40 time guy. He was an excellent special teamer. He was as good of a hold-up guy as there was in the league on punt return. He just was able to get into his guy, hands inside, and be able to hold him up. But I think that's a big reason. It's funny, too. I was talking with a coach, actually, for the Jaguars last night, and we were talking about a player. And, this is a guy that runs a 4.4 when it's a straight line and it's a 40, but he can't cover anybody.
Right.
And there are those guys too. Like, I think it's a misnomer, and I'm sure you guys study every player, every team, every play, but there are plenty of guys that run great 40 times at the combine or whatever, but they are not good in coverage.
Yeah.
And their speed cannot make up for it. They just they're not fluid, or they just don't see things. They just don't have the anticipation that you need when you're in zone coverage, or to be able to see route combinations. And so this idea of, well, he runs a 4.52, he'll be good in coverage, is a lot of times really flawed.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what you're saying, that nails it, because we were just talking about it, Sam, on the sideline yesterday. We were at Colts-Browns joint practice, and we were talking about, you've got those receivers that have that pure speed. What separates a Tyreek Hill or a Deshaun Jackson from the other guys that are similarly fast? And then from a corner standpoint or a linebacker standpoint, guys who run 4.4 and are, they're extremely fast, but it's all about coverage. Can you use your hands? Can you mirror guys? And can you slow down? I think that's the biggest thing about speed guys, right? A lot of them struggle to stop. And, well, you need to stop when a receiver stops if you're covering him. Or, like you said, I think from a coverage standpoint, too many people focus on man coverage and say, well, he can stick with him in man, or he has deep speed or long speed, when, like you're saying, it's whether you're linebacker, corner, safety, it's understanding route combinations, it's understanding what the offense is trying to do, spacing, tackling in space, all that type of thing. So that's where I'd like to think that our production stuff comes through, because we're just saying, hey, how well did you guys play the game? The other interesting part, though, about like a TJ Edwards type is, if anything, we've been burned. If there's a tough position to evaluate just using PFF grades, it's linebacker, probably. Linebacker and safety, because there is this baseline of athleticism that usually shows up in the NFL, right? So we've had some really highly graded linebackers, like a Paul Dawson, who went to the Cincinnati Bengals, like a Scooby Wright, who just couldn't make it in the league for various reasons, but one of them being, that lack of athleticism. So it's one of those things we're always trying to sift through, like, where's that balance of, this guy's a really good football player, but at some point they do get exposed from an athleticism standpoint at the next level.
Is there another? Can I ask you guys about another guy?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so the star of the Eagles preseason so far has probably been Deshaun Hall.
Yeah, Texas A&M.
Texas A&M. He was, I think, opposite Myles Garrett.
Yep.
6'5.5", 265, drafted in the third round by Carolina, IR, then waived a year ago. Niners practice squad for a while. Then the Texans picked him up. Then they waived him. Then he was practice squad for a while. And then in December, the Eagles picked him up off the Texans practice squad. So I think he was playing, I've been told he was playing like 3-4 outside backer, which is an interesting fit for a guy that's almost 6'6".
Really long, yeah.
But I don't know if you guys have had a chance to watch him. He has to have at least 5 sacks. And like last night again, Thursday night against the Jaguars, he had 2 more sacks. Another one was a strip sack. And he is really doing a nice job with his hands. And it's interesting because Josh Sweat, who was a 4th-round pick a year ago from Florida State, is the one that was really generating a lot of buzz in training camp and in OTAs, and Josh Sweat has been good. Josh Sweat's been very good in these preseason games. Done a nice job with his get-off, done a nice job with his long arm. He even, made some plays against Taylor Lewan, who the Titans kept in like the whole first half because of his 4-game suspension.
Right.
And Sweat made a couple plays against him. But Deshaun Hall, I think, and this is not inside information for me. This is reading the Eagles beat writers. I think at the start of camp, the Eagles depth chart at defensive end would have been, Brandon Graham, Derek Barnett, and Vinny Curry are the top three. Then probably Josh Sweat 4. Joe Osman, who tore his ACL, was a guy at maybe the 50 end who was getting a lot of pub. And they drafted Sharif Miller out of Penn State in the 4th round. So you got to think he'll be on the roster. And he's actually been pretty good in the preseason and made some plays. But this Deshaun Hall, guys, holy cow. I mean, he has been unbelievable. And so I guess I'm wondering what you guys had on him coming out of college and what you've seen from him, I guess, in the last 2 preseasons, if you don't have any grades on him so far this year.
Oh, we do. We've graded every preseason snap already, so we have it. He's got 2 90-plus grades in the 2 preseason games. I think it's 3 sacks, 5 QB hits already, and a bunch of hurries, Sam. And then, with Hall, he's actually similar to Josh Sweat, I'd say, in our mind, where he has that length and he's got that, just that long defensive end look. But in college, Hall wasn't terribly productive. Yeah, he was opposite Myles Garrett, who tore it up. He was a 90-plus guy in our system, every year at Texas A&M. Hall was just kind of solid on the other side. And so him going in the 3rd round, just like Sweat going in the 4th round, was kind of a, these guys are projects. They're athletic, they're long, they've got everything you're looking for, but they might take a little bit of time. So I think they're very similar in that department. With Sweat, I mean, you could definitely see the burst, the explosion. I mean, as a true freshman, he came in there and just could stop the run in college, but he never really dominated as a pass rusher like you want to see. So I think Hall is kind of similar in that it might take a little bit of time to learn how to use all their tools, and Hall's tearing it up right now. He's
already got the same number of total pressures this preseason as he did last preseason on less than half the pass rushing snaps.
So, I mean, the Eagles, they don't have enough pass rushers. That's what they needed. They need 15 guys that can get after the quarterback.
From a body type standpoint, I just think he's a better fit with his hand in the ground than as a stand-up guy at 6'6". So he's been one that's really jumped out. It's funny, too. I don't know how you guys feel. I'm curious, and I know I got to go here, but I love preseason because for so many of these guys, it's our only time to really watch them.
Yeah.
So like, I'll give you guys for the Eagles, Andre Dillard, the 1st-round pick left tackle. He's been very good. If Peter stays healthy, Andre Dillard won't play, but I at least have an opinion on him, which is that he is very technically sound for a rookie. I mean, he is very good with his hands. I don't know how he graded for you guys, but he's impressive. So he's jumped out to me. Jordan Mailata at right tackle was kind of up and down in camp, but he's been pretty darn good in the first 2 preseason games. The Australian kid who never even went to college, never played a snap of football in his life until last year.
That's who
he's still the 3rd youngest player on the team.
Yeah, that's who I wanted to ask you about, because this is a guy coming from a completely different sport, coming from rugby, and a lot of people have been sort of singing his praises as incredibly well developed for somebody that's that new to the game. What are you seeing as a former offensive lineman?
Okay, so last year I wasn't the analyst for these games. I just watched them from my house. And knowing the Mailata story and watching him, I just couldn't believe how good he looked in the preseason. I mean, the guy never played the sport before. I wasn't seeing mental errors. He looked really nice in his pass set. When a guy would bull rush, it was like they ran into a wall. I mean, it was like, and he was good with his hands, and he showed he could move. And he was better to me last year in the preseason games than my former teammate Jason Peters was his 2nd year in the NFL in the preseason games. So I probably got carried away a little bit and said, I no longer think he's going to make the team or be a starter. I think this guy's going to be like an all-pro. Because if you guys haven't seen him, he's just about 6'9", 355.
Just like Steve.
And looks great.
Oh man, I'm creeping up to that level. Ross, I'm creeping up there.
He looks amazing.
This is chisel,
physically.
Steve. Oh, it's a good
like
350.
looking at him. it was funny. He was like in a middle seat on the team plane coming back last night. There was nobody on either side of him.
Oh, I was going to say.
But it's still just funny to see a guy like that in a middle seat, period. And he's been good this preseason. Now, I know the first game, it looked to me like he had a mental error. And there are times, I think, that his technique gets a little bit lazy.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, though, I think he played every snap last night. I know in the first game he played 53 out of 57 snaps. So part of it might be, part of the technique might be fatigue, but some of these run plays too, he is getting a lot of movement. I don't think he's gotten beat clean for a sack or a hit on the quarterback yet. So I would say I am still very, very bullish on Mailata long term. I would say it's probably just going to be another year would be my guess.
Yeah, to me, it's one of the fascinating stories in the NFL because I don't know if you know this, but we ranked the Eagles, and Eagles fans hate this, but we gave them the number 1 offensive line, the number 1 pass rush, and number 1 group of pass catchers. And we didn't even mean to do it, because we did this in isolation, and they just happened to rank number 1. So they've already got, in our minds, the best offensive line. That's with Andre Dillard as a backup, with Mailata out of nowhere, essentially, as a potential future starter. The rest of the NFL can barely find 5 starters, and they're rolling 7 or 8 deep of legitimate, talented players. I think it's a massive story in the NFL because the Eagles have just done a fantastic job of roster building. Yeah, and Mailata, we have a couple big time blocks in there from a grading standpoint. Sam and
Nice.
Ross, big time. Those big movement blocks. We graded them. They're good. Yeah, he's graded solid for us so far. And Dillard has, your eyes are good, Ross. Dillard has, I think he's in the 80s from a grading standpoint through 2 games. He's been fantastic for us. So
yeah, and I'll even just add to that. They still have Wisniewski as a backup inside. Right. They still have Big V, Vaitai, who has played tackle, and he's actually with Brandon Brooks out. He's done a solid job at right guard. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be a Pro Bowler ever there, but he's at least shown he could hold it down at right guard like he's held it down at tackle before, including the Super Bowl a couple years ago. So, yeah, and I just saw today, while we're talking, they got this Brett Toss from the Army who signed the military waiver. So, yeah, their offensive line, if it's not the best second-string offensive line in the league, it's up there, and it's certainly like the biggest. Matt Pryor and Vaitai and Mailata, they are these guys. I was on the plane with them. They are gigantic.
Yeah, I love it, man. They're doing a fantastic job of building that roster in Philadelphia. So, yeah, we could talk old linemen all day, Ross, but we do have to let you go. We appreciate you coming on again, and we'll give you another chance to. Do you have the podcast? You want to give us a list of the podcast again?
Sure, yeah.
At Ross Tucker NFL.
Yeah. At Ross Tucker NFL is my Twitter. I appreciate anybody checking it out. If they get a chance, Ross Tucker Football Podcast, Fantasy Feast, Even Money. If you're really into draft stuff, I have a college draft podcast, and then Andrew Brandt does the Business of Sports podcast. Got to get you guys on my show soon. I know on the Even Money Gambling podcast next week, I'm having your guy George on.
Oh, beautiful.
I am not sure how to pronounce George's last name.
Nobody is. Don't worry about it.
So I think
tell me so I know for when I'm actually talking to the guy.
I think it's Shahori.
Yeah, you see, this is the problem, right? Is that the middle of it contains a phonetic that we don't have in this country.
Yeah.
So you're going to struggle whatever it is.
It took us like over a year to even get it right once, but I think it's Shahori.
Yeah, it's like in the back of your throat, Shahori.
There you go.
Shahori.
Perfect.
Awesome.
And he'll correct you.
You guys are the best. Thank you for having me. Keep up the great work. Huge fan of everything you guys do, and I'm glad you guys just keep growing and getting bigger and bigger every year.
Of course. Appreciate it, Ross.
Thanks, Ross.
Anytime.
All right. See you guys.
Special thanks again to Ross Tucker. He's like he's kind of like a partner a little bit. We're both on Podcast One. We're kind of we're in the same
colleagues
sphere. Colleagues. Yes, that's what I meant to say.
Okay.
Thank you. So thank you to Ross, and he invited us back. It's like this tennis match.
Yeah.
He invites us, we invite him, and he's going to have George on his pod next week. So
right.
Before we get into a little bit of Browns Colts and a little bit of preseason Week 2 discussion, quick break to tell you about fantasy football. It's Jeff Ratcliffe and the PFF Fantasy Minute.
Thanks, guys. It's been a really interesting week at the quarterback position for fantasy football purposes, as one of the top quarterbacks, Andrew Luck, has a somewhat mysterious lower leg injury, calf, ankle, all in between, and it's certainly placed a damper on his fantasy football outlook, at least in the short term here. You know, heading into the preseason, I had this guy ranked as my number 3 quarterback, and I thought there was a viable shot that he could contend for the number 1 spot if we see regression from Patrick Mahomes. Unfortunately, if you're drafting and Andrew Luck isn't on the field, well, you can't draft him with much confidence. So I lowered him from number 3 in my quarterback rankings all the way down to number 10. I'm not comfortable drafting him any earlier than about the 9th or 10th round. And there you're shooting for upside, so you have to have a backup plan in place. We'll see if Andrew Luck can get back on the field. I think we'll have a little bit more clarity here as we go forward, but we could be prepared for him to miss some time into the regular season. And that means he misses some time for fantasy football purposes. If you want to check out more PFF fantasy goodness, make sure to listen to my podcast, the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And of course, check out everything we have to offer at pff.com for fantasy. Now back over to you, Sam and Steve.
Welcome back. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate that. Don't forget, PFF Elite is where you get the best of our fantasy tools over at pff.com. It is fantasy season, Sam.
It is.
Are you in any leagues this year?
No.
Make something up. So
No, I'm not.
So the fans
No.
think that you're
No.
using the tools that we
No,
use?
I'm not. I'm helping other people use the tools, but I don't use the tools because I don't play fantasy football.
Well, it's not fair, because if you have the tools and you're in the league, you'll automatically
That's
win.
exactly the reason I'm not doing it.
That's why. PFF Elite. Go
you,
check
on
it
the
out.
other hand,
PFF.com.
are using it because you have no scruples.
I dominate. Well, it's an expert league. I don't just do any leagues.
That's true, right? You have enough scruples that you're only limiting your fantasy wrath to experts. You're not dominating the general public.
Right. I wouldn't
merely fantasy
wouldn't
experts.
do that. But
right.
you can dominate the general public. PFF.com. Grab Elite. All right. So yesterday we went over to Colts camp, a little joint practice between the Browns and the Colts.
How did we get there, Steve?
We drove in Steve's minivan. What's wrong with that?
After 25 minutes of trying to Austin Powers it out of the parking lot at PFF.
So we have a garage at PFF.
Garage, that's the word I was looking for.
A garage.
Garage, yeah.
And what does it fit? Like 10 cars? It's like 10 cars in there.
max, not even 10, right?
So Chris, I mean, I can tell the story because we're not in his office this time, but Chris always parks directly behind the minivan. And I'm right next to a pole, and there's a car on either side of me. It legitimately took 15 minutes for me to maneuver the minivan without hitting the Tesla.
Right. This was legitimate, like Austin Powers style of the thing in the corridor. It was you.
You did a great job.
Windows down, me running front and back of the car, going, come on, back. No.
I was this close to each car every single time.
Yeah, pretty much.
But we made it. Took us
It
15
hasn't
minutes
occurred to me
get
until
out.
now, but now I really hope that Chris is deliberately parking behind the minivan just for giggles.
I don't appreciate it. I mean, you would think the boss would have a better spot.
Well,
in the garage.
his is the prime spot, to be fair, in that
I mean, it's the best in and out, but it does ruin the life of those in a minivan. So, anyway, we got in the minivan.
We rolled in the minivan from here
up to Indy. But I think that 15 minutes killed us because we didn't get the pregame spread for the media.
Yes.
I feel like we just missed it.
We did.
Because of that 15 minutes.
We missed that. We also missed the instructions on when we were allowed to film things. So you got admonished by
it was a warning.
An earnest-looking man in a Colts.
It was a warning.
In a Colts T-shirt.
I sensed it coming because he kind of like was lurking near me, and I'm like,
Well, the problem is, so
can I take video of these plays or not?
Your dimensions and general aura, right? It cuts both ways, right? You're very useful to see because, you're huge and you have the big Jerry thing going. And if you're looking for you over any kind of distance, it's like, oh, there's Steve, easy. Head towards him. On the other hand, when you have your phone up here getting the aerial all-22 shot at the top of your arms, you're like a beacon to anybody looking for people, trying to film practice.
I can do what I want. I'm like an employee for the team.
So this guy from like half a mile away was like, okay, there's somebody contravening the rules.
He came sprinting over from field 1 to field 2 to
avoided
find me.
Avoided the shotgun sounds coming from the old sound system and was like, sir, the filming portion is over. Would you kindly put that away?
I got a couple plays in, though. I mean, you snuck a picture of Odell Beckham.
And John Dorsey.
You got Dorsey.
Dude, it's like 90 degrees out there, and Dorsey's still in the sweatshirt. What
still
is
in
with
the
that?
brown sweatshirt.
So John Dorsey's in the brown sweatshirt. Odell Beckham is practicing in a hoodie.
Yeah.
I'm in a short sleeve shirt, and I'm dying of
Sheldon
overheating.
Richardson full hoodie too.
Right. What is with that?
I don't understand.
It's insane. I would in that weather. I would want as little sleeving as humanly possible, let alone having a hoodie. It's crazy, Steve. It's madness.
Crazy. It was crazy. That wasn't our only takeaway. We ran into some.
That's true. We had football takeaways.
We ran into some podcast fans.
We did.
So that was always fun. Appreciate meeting the fans when we're over there. Mm-hmm. We saw Baker up close and personal.
Yeah.
The Browns offense. We watched a lot of Browns offense versus Colts defense. I think you're also not supposed to talk about schematic stuff that you saw.
Okay.
Can I? Can we talk about schematic stuff?
I don't know. It's a public practice, right? Surely you can.
Yeah, but
isn't the deal supposed to be like
we were in as media?
Yeah, but isn't the deal supposed to be when it's a closed practice and media you can't? Isn't that the thing?
Maybe, but if there's a no recording session,
yes,
part of the session, you might not be able to report schematics on that stuff. But it's stuff that I find interesting. I think the Colts. Look, I tweeted it out yesterday. It looks like the Colts are going to play a lot more man coverage this year.
Yes,
they've added a lot of athleticism.
I was going to give you a perfect way of sliding it in there without contravening the rules. But you just full bore.
How are you going to do it?
Well, I was going to say, from all the preseason snaps we've seen, the Colts are heading in a dramatic shift to man coverage from zone coverage.
Even then, I don't think that's illegal for us to talk about.
What
too.
Preseason? You do whatever we want in preseason,
but it's all 22.
Well,
look, we work for all 32 teams. We're
able to diagnose cover one from the TV tape. And
you could see it.
It's later confirmed by other means.
You could see it through the TV tape. Anyway, here are the takeaways from the practice. Do you guys fast forward to now? Let's talk about the practice, okay?
Yeah, it's like 3 minutes worth of discussing whether we can even talk about this.
Baker's zipping it all over the place.
Yeah. Did throw a pick, though.
Which the fans told me was a miscommunication, which I could see. I mean, that happens a lot. It was so far off, it probably was. And then he was finding Jarvis Landry in the red zone quite a bit. Finding Higgins. Diving catch by Jalen Strong. So they're spreading the ball around.
Jalen Strong was getting a lot of first-team reps.
He was.
Now, okay, they were their first-team reps where Odell Beckham wasn't on the field.
Yeah, but if you're talking about him as like a number 4 receiver, that's not bad.
Well, not just that. That's if you're the guy who's on the first-team reps when Odell Beckham isn't there, you're not just he might make the team. You're
Odell Beckham's backup.
Yeah, you're like the 4th-string receiver, which is pretty safe.
So that was interesting, and then I thought, okay, Colts are trying to play a little bit more man because we kept talking about them as one of the. If you just listen to the AFC South breakdown, one of the most zone-heavy teams. But they were talking about this all the way back in the spring. Anyway, they get Rocky Sin. They want to be a little bit more physical. They get Jalen Collins out there, who's a big physical guy. I don't know if he's going to make the team, but they are Marvell Tell. I mean, they're getting those big long corners that can press and play on the edge, press and run and everything. So I will say the Browns kind of torched them over the middle of the field, though.
First team in
cuts.
Second team has Drew Stanton, the quarterback, so they didn't.
Yeah, Drew Stanton was not nearly as good as Baker in the first team. But we're talking slants, digs, posts.
Yeah.
Seemed to be open, whether they're 2-minute drill, no matter what it was. We saw a lot of that.
Yeah, and then it's going to be funny because this Browns team is definitely going to be able to pass the ball with that array of weaponry and Baker. But every time when they go to the run, Nick Chubb just rattles off like a 70-yard touchdown, scores immediately.
He did.
This
nice
is kind of what this offense feels like it's going to be this year. They're going to pass the ball a lot, but when they do run the ball, it's going to be explosive because nobody's playing it.
They have Nick Chubb there too. I think from a Colts perspective, it's tough to you only see the play once. So it's not like when we're grading, you can go back and watch it 15 times and make sure you're seeing what you're seeing. It did look like Malik Hooker took a bit of a bad angle in the secondary there.
Not really a run defender. He's a coverage player.
He is. And so that's the interesting thing about if they are going to play a little bit more cover one, it frees him out to be that free safety. It might play to his skill set a little bit better and give him more opportunities, to shut down the deep middle of the field. So I think that's something to keep an eye on over there.
Yeah, it was a fun experience, though. You get some interesting things that you just don't consider, from watching games or watching or grading or whatever. There's always something interesting that you pick up from watching these practices. Not necessarily to the point of, I need to see guys in person, otherwise it doesn't count. But just interesting little pieces, nuggets that you pick up here or there.
We still properly evaluated Baker Mayfield, despite yesterday
Yes.
being the first time you and I had ever seen him in person.
Yeah.
But I will say the Colts defense, they're going to be one of the fascinating stories in the league because they have, as we said in the podcast, added so much length. They feel like they can play multiple styles. They've got some versatile players like a Ben Banigou who they get in the second round, who's going to play Sam, and he's going to be a pass rusher. He's going to move around. Bobby Okereke in the middle, who's got the length. I mean, they're just seeing how these pieces fit on that defensive side. I think is going to be one of the stories of the season.
If they are genuinely doing that in terms of going from one of the most zone-heavy teams to one of the most man-heavy teams, just because they now think they have the horses, that's kind of amazing. Most people do not do that. Like, you have a system, and you try and get the players that fit your system, and you might modify it a little bit, but you don't, like, completely change
And we don't know how much
Right. This is what I'm saying.
do.
Right?
Yeah.
But if that's what they do, I don't want to say it's unprecedented, but it's highly unusual.
Yeah.
Teams do not typically do that, essentially completely pivot one end of the scale to the other schematically, just based off, okay, now we think we have players that can do this. We're going to swing that way.
Well, here's what's interesting, right? We've got Eric and George, Eric in particular, doing a lot of work right now on kind of identifying schemes through the years and saying this offense is identified by this, this, and this, or this defense is identified by this, this, and this. And his early work, you can kind of throw some teams into a bucket. Like, so the whole Shanahan scheme, you're like, all right, these guys run play action, they run outside zone, they run bootleg. There are some distinct characteristics. But what you find is, I think schematically, there's like 5, maybe 10 teams in the NFL that maybe have distinct characteristics, but the most of them are very similar. You can look at teams and say, okay, they have a variety of run game concepts. They have a variety of, there's no distinct pass game quality. There's no distinct run-pass ratio. All these different things we're using to define them. There's just outliers, So the Colts might just be going from, okay, into zone heavy, really far on one side of the spectrum, and then probably just going back toward the middle and mixing it up a little bit more and not really having, necessarily, distinct characteristics necessarily. Anything else from practice? A lot of fights.
A lot of fights.
At practice.
Which Myles Garrett smartly wanted no part of.
We were standing right next to Myles, and it's really silly. I mean, it's baseball analogy. It's like, running in from the bullpen for a fight.
That's exactly what it was.
For nothing.
So there's 2 different practice fields, right? There was practice field 1, practice field 2. And obviously, Browns offense versus Colts defense on one, Colts offense versus Browns defense on the other one. So one field, there will be a fight, spark, and then everybody from the other field sprints in the direction of the rumble.
For no reason.
Right, just to join the pile. And then, so almost literally the field empties. Myles Garrett's just standing there looking at it like, what are you doing?
We're standing right next to him. I go, smart move, stay out of it. He goes, oh, yeah,
ain't got time for that.
Ain't got time for that is what he's, yeah, absolutely. And smart. I think it was him and like Morgan Burnett was like, all right.
Slow jog.
I'm a veteran.
Right.
I'm not, I don't need this.
The young guys sprint from one field to the other.
Yeah.
Morgan Burnett is like, I'm going to slow jog in that direction. Hopefully it's over by the time I get there. The other thing, though, is, the way you get, the get-back coach? So Sean McVay's get-back coach, his idea is literally just grab him, pull him away from the sideline so he doesn't get run over, right? Baker needs a camp fight get-back coach.
Yeah,
because
he's in the
Baker
middle.
is like the third guy into the pile every time. And like they need to assign like an offensive lineman to be Baker's like personal protector.
I mean, that could be the most value that Drew Stanton brings
Your
to the table.
job is to launch yourself into that pile and get Baker out of it before somebody hurts him.
A Baker get-back coach.
Yes.
For all the fights. So, anyway, I think the big takeaway here, Colts need Andrew Luck. That's my big takeaway.
I mean, yeah.
They need him to play.
That will help.
So that was camp yesterday. Let's discuss a little bit of the games last night. There was 3 quarterbacks, I think. 3 rookie quarterbacks worth discussing here. Dwayne Haskins, Kyler Murray, and Ryan Finley of the Bengals. So let's start with Haskins. I tweeted out my notes. Did you see my notes? I sent some notes out. I had some Haskins notes. I had some, and we can talk about Andy Isabella. All right. So these are the things that stood out to me.
I saw those notes.
Okay.
Because I was tagged in them.
I didn't tag you.
No, I was tagged in the reply or something. I saw the Andy Isabella thing.
Oh, because somebody tagged you because of the Russian pencil.
Yeah.
Anyway, a Russian pen.
In fact,
whatever.
yes. Would you please refer to him by his official nickname?
He is the Russian pencil, Andy Isabella. Okay, so Dwayne Haskins, here's what I saw. The highlight was the big play down the field. It was excellent. He was under pressure. It was an unblocked pressure. I have to say the Bengals did a really good job of those double A gap, sugared A gaps, as they like to say. The mug look. There's so many ways to say it. They're freeing up their edge rushers. Jordan Willis had a big game. He had a lot of one-on-ones, but they were freeing guys up. So Dwayne Haskins knows he's going to take a hit, makes the throw through contact, hits a guy, not completely in stride, but hits him downfield. Really nice play. That was one of the best throws of the week. Great job by Haskins. He then missed 3 deep passes, 2 straight go balls he missed by quite a bit, and a corner route missed by quite a bit. There was no receiver getting slowed up at any point in the route. He just straight missed them. His short area accuracy wasn't great. I think he left some yards after a catch on the table. And then pocket presence-wise, it was a mixed bag. Kind of stepped through the pocket, could have hit a check down, and he ran for a couple of yards. Another time, he took a sack, his last drop back that he shouldn't have taken. Another time, he looked downfield and had a pass broken up, but he was still looking down the field. So it was just a mixed bag, I think, overall for Haskins. Had the big-time throw, no turnover-worthy throws, I don't believe, but he just missed. His overall accuracy yesterday was not great. I think it was a middle-of-the-road type of grade. I didn't see our official grade, but it was middle. What it ended up
51.3.
Oh, so a little bit below average because of those misses, despite that big-time throw down the field. Kyler Murray was not good at all. There was a couple, and I do think, and Jeff Schwartz has talked about this on Twitter a little bit, some people are wondering how the air raid's going to be from a pass protection standpoint. I think there are some legitimate concerns. They're in empty, and there's a 6-man pressure coming after him. The Raiders, credit the Raiders defense. I didn't check. Can you pull up their blitz percentages real quick? Anywhere? Tell me how many times Kyler, if you're in premium.
I'm there.
And then the Knuth. Who are the quarterbacks that played? Because there was garbage time at the end where forget Drew Anderson's numbers. How much were the first 2 QBs? Okay. No, Hundley. Just Kyler and Hundley. So the Raiders were getting after it. Really nice job of 5- and 6-man pressures. The Cardinals were not having it. All their running backs looked a little confused.
So using PFF Premium Stats 2.0, all part of your elite package, Brett Hundley was blitzed 7 out of 16 dropbacks.
So that's pretty high. That's about 42%.
Yeah, and had a grade of just 45 on those plays. When he wasn't blitzed, his grade was 92.
Oh, he dropped some dimes down the field.
Yeah. So that was Hundley, Kyler Murray, flip to the drop down.
7 for 6.
Woo!
It's a more than 42%.
Kyler Murray blitzed on 6 of his 10 dropbacks.
That's 60%.
It is. It's 60%.
That's an easy one.
And his grade was 43.7 on those plays.
So there we go. I meant to check it, after watching it, but the Raiders,
his grade was like 40 across the board, but
it wasn't good.
Yeah.
The Raiders did a really good job of blitzing,
but they generated 2
creating
sacks.
Pressure. Yeah, and one of them was that again, it's empty, unblocked sack, and the Cardinals had 4 routes, all beyond 10 yards.
That's
3 verticals and a deep curl.
So that's the concerning thing about that play. It's not that Kyler took a safety or that Kyler screwed up or so he's the extra man is essentially on the quarterback, right? Because there's only 5 guys to pick up the 5 rushers. If you bring 6, it's on the quarterback. He has to know that.
Right.
So he tries to spin out of that. He falls over. He ends up in the end zone. Guy touches him down. Safety, right? It's not good, but spinning out was essentially all he had left because there was no hot route. Now, that's the biggest problem.
There's nothing short for him to throw.
There's a guy coming off the edge, and you don't have a route for him to go to. So this idea of, okay, that extra guy is on the quarterback, fine, but the quarterback needs somewhere to go with the ball. You can't just say, get rid of it.
It may not have been empty. I think the running back may have been opposite where the extra man was coming. Either way, whatever it was, there was an overload blitz and there was no outlet for him.
Yes.
Later in the game, it wasn't Kyler. It might have been Hundley. There was a blitz, and they leaked a running back out to the flat. So I think it's going to be one of those. This is how Steve Spurrier used to do it, but kind of struggle at times in the NFL. His big transition to the NFL was handling protections.
Yeah.
He just didn't have the attention to detail to handle NFL blitz schemes. But the way he liked to handle it was just throw 5 guys out into the route,
Which
right?
is fine, but there's got to be an outlet, right?
There needs to be.
You can't.
Yes.
they can't all be running a long developing thing in order for the quarterback to have anywhere to go with the ball.
Yeah.
He needs to at least, even if it's not a hot route coming in behind the blitzer, something has to be quick.
Just need something short, right? And I know it was 3rd and long, and they're trying to, and again, we don't know if he has the opportunity to change the play.
Yeah.
And he also, there was multiple times when he could have taken a hit, and it just felt like self-preservation. Like, hey, it's the preseason.
And I'm all for that.
And I'm all for that as well. So I don't think it's the bigger concern for me was he was missing throws. Missed a throw on the run. It looks like the slot vertical game is going to be a big part of the Cardinals game, which we'll talk about Isabella in a second. But there were multiple slot verticals in this game, some back shoulders, some deep passes. He missed one of those. So we just missed a few passes. So Kyler did not look great.
No. And
then I do think there are some legit protection concerns maybe that Arizona, beyond just the skill level of the offensive line, but just, the schematics of picking up blitzes and all that stuff. It did seem like a lot of NFL teams are doing a really good job of stacking the front and just kind of little gap exchanges that are screwing up offensive lines right now. Just what I've noticed from a lot of passing plays. Before we get to Ryan Finley, Andy Isabella, when I was watching him, I sent you a note.
Excuse me? Who?
Sorry, the Russian pencil. Mm-hmm. Is it a pencil or a pen?
Pencil. The Russians used a pencil.
The Russian pencil.
You might have to explain that for anyone that hasn't.
I think you do, because you came up with this ridiculous analogy.
I didn't come up with it. It's a well-known thing.
It's a well-known.
It may be apocryphal, but it's like a well-known
analogy.
It's a well-known story.
Yeah, but you turned it into an analogy.
Oh yeah, I turned it into Andy Isabella. But the Russian pencil thing is not me coming up with this story. This is a thing that everyone knows. The story being, for anyone that is like Steve and doesn't know, apparently, and as I say, this is probably apocryphal, so probably didn't happen, but apparently NASA spent millions and millions developing this pen that for outer space that would write in 0G, underwater, upside down, whatever, in a vacuum, and the Russians used a pencil. The idea being that, they spent ages, did all this extra stuff, and really all you needed to do was use a pencil.
Yeah.
And I liken this to Andy Isabella's route running, particularly on underneath stuff, right? Which is he does all this crazy juking and jinking and moving and faking, and all he needs to do is just run the out. You're fast, you're quick, you move better than he does, just running out. I don't need to see 17 fakes and missteps before you do it.
Yeah.
Just run the out. Don't use the NASA pen, use the Russian pencil. So Andy Isabella is the Russian pencil.
So all of that seemed to come true. Here was, let me sum up Andy Isabella's night.
Okay.
He runs a corner route where he definitely had a little bit too much in it. Instead of, you don't always run it exactly how it is in the playbook, but you want to just kind of like lean it and then get out. He kind of like got here, leaned it, then leaned it again, and then, it was just off, right? So the pass, it was still an overthrow, but I think it would have been a lot closer had he run the timing. Then your big question, I know, coming out of the Senior Bowl was how is he going to handle physicality? I mean, it's pretty much for essentially every college wide receiver. How will they transition to the NFL? And it's not just press. It's just any time inside that 5 yards. Does he have the physicality to not get knocked off his route? Got knocked off of a route at about 4 or 5 yards, and he just gets stuck on the corner a little bit. So we saw that. He ran a corner route. He did create separation because he didn't get pressed or anything like that. But then the small catch radius kind of came into play. It was a high throw. He probably should have caught it, but he drops it. So the questions did arise about his hands, despite only 6 drops last year, but they showed up at the Senior Bowl. Small catch radius was an issue, so he had the drop. But then he had the deep touchdown. And this is where we thought he was potentially special.
Yeah.
He ran right by, I don't even know who the corner was, but he ran by him, had 2 steps. The ball was really underthrown. And we talk about this with Randy Moss all the time, what he was so good at. He did a really good job of throttling down enough to keep the corner on his hip and then made the catch at the catch point in a contested situation, which was impressive. And that became like a 60-plus yard, whatever the yardage was. So some good, some bad, and a lot of what we saw in college for Andy Isabella.
Yeah, I mean,
it's my assessment.
Players are who we thought they were.
Yeah,
all the way through preseason. Although Kyler Murray has now been either side, so that doesn't always work.
And the other interesting thing is he was doing this out of the slot, but a lot of like stack alignments and different things like that. We did say you want to free him up a little bit. So they're using him in the slot, but not in Wes Welker, short option route type of slot. I'm telling like the vertical slot game. So he's running corners and he's running go balls out of the slot.
You kind of want to use him the same way you want to use N'Keal Harry, but for different reasons. Like N'Keal Harry struggles to get separation, so you need to scheme the separation. Andy Isabella doesn't struggle to get separation, but he struggles to deal with physicality if it's put in his path.
Right.
So same thing, you want to scheme him the separation so he doesn't have to deal with that. So you're kind of achieving the same thing, but for completely different reasons and completely different body dimensions.
And I think what you talk about, like the corners get stuck to him a little bit. All he needs to learn is how to like leverage off of that. That was one of the things that Brandon Cooks does really well, and he was the comparison we used. All right, last thing, Ryan Finley.
Okay.
Really, really good game for the Bengals. He was 20 for 26 passing. There was a drop in there, a spike, and a Hail Mary. He really only missed 1 or 2 passes.
Right.
I think it was 2 passes that he missed. A little short out and a little short in. But overall, pocket movement was fantastic. He hit 2 digs over the middle around underneath defenders. And again, when we talk about college quarterbacks coming to the NFL, they don't throw a lot of intermediate and deep passes over the middle where there's underneath defenders in their way. That's kind of the college game. A lot of those are more open. So when we talk about NFL throws, the ability to do that is impressive. He doesn't have a great arm. He never had a great arm, right? But so some of those like outside lane throws, as Zach liked to call them, those outside curls and comebacks and stuff, they just lack zip, and they need to be perfect. It's one of those where like the defenders close quickly if you're not getting it out there quick enough. But overall, Finley looked really good, and I think it's just speaks to that whole, you got a guy that can run the offense, he's going to make good decisions, works well in the boot game. He does a lot of things pretty well, doesn't have exceptional physical tools. That is well worth a mid-round pick.
Yeah, and he's an interesting guy because his grades in college were decent.
They were better than Daniel Jones in the ACC.
Yes. This is the thing, right?
And I don't think Daniel Jones is – so that's the thing about Daniel Jones. There are other – like when Josh Allen was drafted in the first round, you're like, look, the production might not be there, but he had one big year, and the physical tools –
are special.
Right. Daniel Jones doesn't – he's got a better arm than Finley.
His physical tools aren't special.
They're not special at
decent.
all. Yeah. And so that's the interesting thing about Daniel Jones, because throw for throw, Finley was probably
Finley had back-to-back PFF graded seasons of, 89 essentially, right? 89.3 in 2017, 89.9 in 2018. That is significantly better than Jones. What was his bet? Like 83 his
81
best year?
or 82, I think, last year. Yeah.
So like that, it's not right up there with the very, very best guys, the Bakers, the Kylers, the guys way over 90, but it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that he gets dinged for he doesn't have the physical tools.
But the knock on Finley, the lack of physical tools did show up. So when he did play better competition, like his grade was only like in the 70s last year against ACC competition. I forget what the
right. But then
what
Daniel
the
Jones'
was.
best game was against Army or whatever. Like,
he tore up Army, Northwestern. I think it was Army, Northwestern, and that was it.
Yeah, so it's not like,
Right. No, I get it. But Finley, the lack of arm strength showed up a lot against Clemson, against some of the better teams. But definitely an interesting guy to keep an eye on.
Best graded quarterback of the week so far. Into more games.
With 5 games. So, yeah, we've got that's our little Thursday review. So that'll do it.
Sure.
For us today.
Uh-huh.
We
got to go and ice up.
Yeah, we had a rough basketball game.
It turns out you and I are both really old and busted.
Yes. I just stopped sweating, first of all, from getting back from the gym.
Sure, that's not ideal.
My knee has been...
Both knees.
Well, now the other knee's a little bit bad. My left knee's really
both of your knees are
shape.
wrecked.
Yeah.
My calf keeps wanting to pull, and that's not great. I also might have broken my wrist running into a wall.
I don't know why you did that.
Because nobody explained. So I've played basketball now 3 times in my life. All 3 have been in the last month, right? So I don't know the rules. So when people yell things like kickball, I don't know what that means.
You didn't know that it was a kick, ball's dead?
No.
Huh.
So I'm running to save a ball from going out, thinking that we'll win it back, running headlong into a brick wall. Saving the ball, by the way. Actually did.
I appreciate the hustle.
Thank you.
Yeah.
May have injured myself doing that. But so Austin's there yelling, kickball, as if that means anything to me, right? It's just
reset
words.
The shot clock, too.
Yeah. So I don't know the rules, which is causing problems, including, notably, a potentially broken wrist, which, by the way, the single biggest impact of which might be torpedoing my run of 200 push-ups a day.
Yeah, because you were like, hey, it's my left hand. I don't need anything. I'm like, well, you're doing push-ups.
Yeah,
you have to type. Like, it doesn't matter that you're writing.
I can type with it, but I might legitimately not be able to do push-ups anymore with it, so that could be a problem.
Sad day.
Yeah,
Sad day.
So we're all busted. We're going to go ice up, not together, you understand, because that would be not great. What do we want to pitch? PFF Elite, everything.
Yeah,
all that kind of stuff.
This is high time. They're coming hot off the shelves right now.
Yeah.
Hot off the shelves.
So anyway, you saw us dig into premium stats to pull up Kyler Murray's numbers, blitz percentage, all that kind of stuff. All kinds of cool stuff in Premium Stats 2.0, particularly with preseason, because let's face it, there are other people out there that want to claim like they cover the NFL and they give you a bunch of data. Nobody's doing the preseason. We're the only people out there grading the guy you've never heard of on the third string.
By 2 p.m. the next day, too.
Yes. So if you want to find out why Kyler Murray got blitzed like crazy, it's all in Premium Stats. Get there, buy it, 365 days of access. Make magic happen.
That's the best part, because if you subscribe today,
should we give them
get it through next preseason.
Yeah. Should we give them the promo code?
Well, yeah. These are our favorite people here.
Join 20 gets you 20% off of anything, really. So
20% off anything at PFF.
Anything at PFF, not anything, because we don't have that kind of power.
Okay. So PFF.com. Join 20.
Yes.
20% off.
20% off.
You can get Edge or Elite. I mean, obviously, I recommend Elite, but if you want to get in on Edge and see what Edge is like. You can try that out. So you can do the monthly option too.
Yes.
So the monthly option to really test it out.
Yep.
Get 20% off there. All right. That'll do it for us. We'll be back next week. We'll finish up our division previews, talk a little bit more preseason, and hopefully be a little bit healthier.
God, yeah.
Thanks, guys. See you next week.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.